And thank you so much, guys, for joining and coming in for this session. And I really hope that you and your loved ones are safe during these uncertain times. Okay, so I'll just present my screen, and I think that will help us start with this. Cool. Thanks, guys, for joining in. And so let me just walk you guys about, walk you through that what we will cover in this session, and what are the key things I'm going to talk about. So we talk about localization. We talk about key tenets of localization. Then I'll jump into the key examples from my experience when we launch payments and shipping at Carousell in Southeast Asia, how we localize the product, and post that I'll open up the discussion to you guys if you have any questions. Cool. Who am I, and what's my experience like? So I started my career in India and in investment banking, and then moved to corporate strategy, and then moved to product management. So in India, I was building product at ClearTax, where I built the B2C marketplace for chartered accountants. And then I moved to Carousell around 2.5 years back. And at Carousell, I primarily handle I'm helping the company to move from a C2C marketplace to a transactional marketplace by launching features in consumer payments and shipping across Southeast Asia. So that's my journey. Just a second, I think somebody wants to admit. Yeah. And cool. So what are the things we're gonna cover in this session? So I'll just briefly talk about what we do at Carousell and what localization is. Why should we localize, and the key tenets, like the key takeaway for you when you're localizing in your product management career, like how should you localize, and how we localized our solution across different markets. So I'm gonna cover a lot of examples in this session. Want to make it more practical and more user focused, so that you guys can understand how you can actually apply those tenets when you are building a product. So let's talk about Carousell and what we do. And for people who are not based in Southeast Asia, you may not know about the company. So Carousell is a C2C marketplace, and we make selling as easy as taking a photo and buying as simple as chatting. So if you want to if you want to buy, and we started in August 2012, and it was in Singapore, and now we have presence across 8 markets across Asia. And on average, users spend 70 minutes per day on a platform, and we have 250 million plus live listings, and we have facilitated roughly over 75 million transactions. So it's a C2C marketplace, helping connecting buyers and sellers primarily for second-hand goods. We are present in 19 cities, 8 markets, 250 million user listings, and 182 million USD raised. As a company, it's multicultural. We have got 700 plus teammates, 19 plus nationalities, and in 8 offices. So I'll now briefly talk about the journey of Carousell and how the company was started. So it was started in 2012, and there's quite an interesting story around how the founders started the company. Our founders come from National University of Singapore, and in NUS, you have this program called NOC. So our founders got an opportunity to go to Silicon Valley and work in Silicon Valley for a year. And during that time, when they're working full time as interns in Silicon Valley, they figured out that there is a big opportunity in entrepreneurship. And they came back to Singapore. They started learning how to build apps, and one of those apps they started building was Carousell. And because they wanted to declutter their lives, they wanted to build a snap list sell app, which eventually, as we all use now, called Carousell. So what do we do, and what's the core about Carousell? It's a C2C marketplace, but what's the flywheel? So we want to provide a great buyer experience, which grows buyer traffic. And, since we get more buyers, which means it will lead to more seller success. And as a result, these sellers, they can sell faster on the platform. And with more sellers, our selection improves and it goes it improves and it gives buyers even better experience. So the whole flywheel starts to work. So that's primarily, what we do at Carousel and what the company is about. Now I'll jump into the localization piece around what is localization and the key tenets of localization and how we have done localization. So this is a short video I want to start with on the topic.
When it comes to Disney Pixar films,
just a second. Cool. I think this is.
We all know about the stories, characters, and infamous Easter.
Can you all listen to the voice? Is it all good?
Yep. It's good.
Eggs. What's lesser known is how these films are altered. We all know about the stories, characters, and infamous Easter eggs. What's lesser known is how these films are altered for an international audience. It's not just what you hear, but also what you see. Here is our look at some of the most interesting examples of Pixar adapting their films for an international audience. Let's start off with something as iconic as a film's title design. Toy Story 3, for example. Simply seeing this image probably sparks a nostalgic response for most of you. However, that image might not feel the same for someone in Russia who was accustomed to this version of Toy Story 3's title art. This is similar for about every film throughout Pixar's catalog. Let's take a look at this scene from Ratatouille. On the top of the screen, you'll see the English version, and the French version is on the bottom. Abundantly full of words, this scene is an example of how the visuals of a movie greatly differ depending on where you view it. You can begin to understand the thought and consideration that goes into creating multiple versions of every single film. Take, for example, Ellie's iconic adventure book in Up. Here are some examples of what that book looks like in several different languages. An alternative option to translation is to replace the words altogether with images, making that particular moment read more universally. The English version of Up features a money jar with Paradise Falls written on it. The international version, however, has an image of Paradise Falls instead. Rather than translating Paradise Falls into several languages, the image automatically makes it comprehensible on a global scale. This is the same treatment used in Monsters University. Rather than translating the scare games, animators replaced it with Greek letters. The same applies to Randall's Cupcakes. Faces are drawn on the cupcakes for the international version. International viewers, however, will miss out on the quick gag that you see here. What's especially interesting is when the changes you see are a direct reflection of culture. For instance, animators replaced broccoli with bell peppers in the Japanese version of Inside Out, since broccoli is widely enjoyed in Japan. On a similar note, when Riley's dad is daydreaming, the American version shows a hockey game being played. In the international version, this has been changed to soccer, since it is a much more popular sport around the world. All of this goes to show the time and thought that is invested into making Disney Pixar films unique and appropriate for viewers across the globe. Keep your eyes peeled for how the films vary depending on where you watch them.
Cool. Just a second. Think. Yeah. I think Disney has done a great job in localization, and how they have customized in when you watch a movie in say in US, you see broccoli. When you're in Japan, you see capsicum, and the same is when you're watching in the US, it's ice hockey, and the same game when you're watching in other parts of the world, it's soccer. I think Disney is one of those companies which has done a great job in localization, and this is more in the offline world or in the media world. And now we'll talk about how as a product manager you can localize your product when you're launching in new markets. So let's just talk about what localization is. So I've seen a lot of people confuse localization with translation. Localization is not just translation. Let's be very clear with the definition of localization. It's about adapting your product or a content to fit to a specific market or a country to meet local needs. And The reason you do it is because you want your product to be accessible. That's one. Second, you want it to be easy to use. And third, it has to solve a user need. And if a company wants to go global from day one, I think they need localization. They want to understand the local user psyche, the local user mindset. And like the whole process is of taking your product, tailoring it to a specific market, and then keeping in mind that you're adapting your product for that country. It's not just translation. It's adapting your product physically, linguistically, and even culturally. So that's one thing which we need to be very clear about. That, but if you say that, hey, I've translated the language translated my product's language into the local country's language. Is that localization? No, that's not what localization is. The second thing which is important for us to understand before we jump into the more details is internationalization. So imagine, say you have launched a product in one country. Let's talk about Grab or Uber. They've launched the ride-hailing service in the States. Now they want to launch in other countries. So you have to localize the product, but at the same time, you need to make sure that your technical architecture, your infra has to be same, which means when you are moving to different countries, you need to have that flexibility in coding, that flexibility in layout, and that flexibility in documentation so that you can easily move, like, say I'm moving from, say, Singapore to Malaysia, then my backend infra needs to be same. Whereas on the client side or on the user side, I localize and I'll introduce local payment methods. I'll introduce, anything which is needed specific to localization. So this is something which is important for us to understand what is internationalization. So localization is so the key 2 points which I've covered is, one is that localization is not translation, and second is internationalization, which is basically you have to build the product in such a way that it can be localized easily. Like you need to have this flexibility in your backend. So now there's a question which we always have, why should we localize? Like, what's the benefit I'm getting by localize? I think a company should localize simply because one size does not fit all. You go and buy a t-shirt, you have different sizes. You need to have a different playbook for each market. You need to have a different product for each market, which caters to the local user needs. Let's talk about, a few of the reasons. One is to make your product accessible, like to make sure that your product reaches the masses. And if you localize it and it's in line with the local country's culture, then people can relate to it and they'll use it. Second, to make your product easy to use. If you say, when we're launching payments, say in Malaysia, and if we don't introduce any local payment method, then users won't use us. I mean, they will have a second thought when they are making payment, that, hey, I don't have the most local used payment method on the platform. And the third is, you have to target the local sentiment and the culture. That's extremely important. If as a company we want to grow in different markets, so if you're expanding and growing in new markets, you have to build those tailored products, penetrate deeper into existing markets, and you have to target those new user segments. And I think the fourth, which is most important, is that competitive advantage. If you localize your product, then users feel that empathy towards you, they have that connect towards you, and because you have built the product suited for them, and that gives you an edge over competitors if they haven't done that. So users will prefer your product over competition. So, like, these are the few basic reasons why, as a company we should, as any company, you should localize, because one size does not fit all. Now the question comes, like, hey, on what basis should I localize? Like, if I'm launching into a new country, what should be the criteria based on which, hey, I'm going to localize, I'm not going to localize? I think first is company strategy. A lot depends on the company strategy in terms of how much important that market is for you. If it's a very core market and we want to tap a significant share of the market, then it's important that, we build a product which caters to the local user need. And second is internet penetration. So why I have mentioned internet penetration, because it's important that, if you're localizing your product, and if internet penetration is same as in your primary market and in the secondary market, then it's okay. So if it's not same, then you need to build features around, how people can access your product in your network area. and then specific to the spending powers, literacy, and currency and consumer mindset. So these are like the high level topics based on which you can localize. I'm going to come back on each of the topics when I'm going to cover the examples in the later part of the session. The another key important point which we need to keep, which we need to keep in mind is that localization comes at a cost of scalability, and it's important for us to know how much to localize. So let's take an example, right? Say let's talk about, say, Uber. And Uber, when you use Uber to book your cab, you enter your to location, and you have your from location, and it gives you an ETA, and based on the country you are in. And now when you are expanding into different markets, you can use the same infra. Say, when you go from country A to country B, you can use the same infra of the same platform, because you have solved the fundamental problem, which is the matching algorithm. You solve that. And in terms of calculating ET, that's also you've solved. So now the question comes: how do we prioritize localization? How do we think about localization and stability? Here, what I recommend, or what I say based on experience, is that we should prioritize only those local features that scale, versus those that are specific to a particular market. We may not prioritize. That depends how much important that market is for us. If that market is extremely important for us, then we should prioritize those local features. If the market is not important for the country, for the company, then you choose that particular feature and build it to an extent where you can manage it. So that's a very key tenet, or the key takeaway which I want to give to most of the people here, that localization comes at a cost of scalability, but you have to see based on how much important the market is for you, that should you prioritize the local feature or not. Cool. So I'll just talk about like few examples of localizations which are outside Carousel, and how localization is done. So all of us know about this Share a Coke campaign. Like, this campaign got extremely famous throughout the world. And what Coke did, they used first names, in basically, like, on the packaging of Coke bottles. What Coke did, that you will see the person's name: Share a Coke with John, share a Coke with, say, Rakshay, share a Coke with anyone, like those first names. And they did it very differently in India, Australia, and Southeast Asia, and other parts of the world. So what they did in Singapore, interestingly, when they launched this campaign in Singapore, it was share a Coke with your bro, with your, with your sister, with your brother. They did not use the first names. Whereas when they launched in Australia or in Europe, they used first names like John, George. The reason is that, in this part of the world, using first names is not considered good. And keeping that in mind, they decided, hey, when we launched a campaign in Singapore or in Southeast Asia, we will localize it, and we will change it and make it more specific to the audience. And that's why they use the generic names. Instead of using first name, they use like share a Coke with your brother, share a Coke with your bro, with your, I think in Chinese you call it Gigi, and share your Coke with Didi, which is your younger brother, and they use those generic names. Cool. Now I think I covered at broad level about localization, like what are the key tenets of localization, and what's internationalization, and when you localize and go into different markets, the key points you need to keep in mind. I'll now go deep into what we have done at Carousel and how we have localized. Like, as a product manager, when I was launching payments and shipping in different parts of the world, how we localized. So just to give you guys a bit of a context, in Singapore, we have got payments. You can pay online on Carousel, and in Malaysia we have got payments and shipping, and in Taiwan we have got a 7-Eleven kind of a shipping flow. So Singapore as a country, it's a country which has got high digital literacy, and it's a small country. So if you want to go from place A to place B, you can easily do a meetup. And if we talk about Malaysia, so Malaysia as a country is a very price sensitive market. There's a high Android penetration, and there's low digital literacy when I compare with Singapore. And in Taiwan, it's a country which has a very high density of 7-Eleven convenience stores. Like when I went to Taiwan, I saw that, every 100, 200 meters, you'll see a 7-Eleven convenience store. And the density is extremely huge in Taiwan. So we launched this payment feature called Carousel Protection in Malaysia and Singapore, and we launched a shipping solution in Taiwan. So it's basically buyers can pay online. Buyers can pay online through Carousel. Carousel will hold the money, and once buyers get the item from the seller and give us a heads up that it's in the same condition, we give the money to the seller. So it's an escrow payment solution. And the benefits buyers get is that it's secured payment, and if they face any issues with purchase, they can reach out to us. Carousel is going to step in and help the buyers out. Just a second. Yeah. So how we localize this solution when we launch in different markets? So Carousel Protection is basically an escrow payment solution, and we work with a payment service provider. What we did when we first launched it in Singapore, and then we launched it in Malaysia. So in Singapore and Malaysia, the backend payment and order infrastructure is same. So, which caters to both the countries. What we have localized is in terms of different payment methods. That's one. Second, we have localized in terms of the local user experience. So we had kept in mind internationalization, which is making sure your backend infra is same so that you can scale easily, whereas we have localized on the user side. As a user, when I open the app, I want to choose different payment methods. In Malaysia, we have credit. In Singapore, we have credit card, debit cards. In Malaysia, in addition to credit card, debit cards, you'll also see online banking, which is one of the most used payment methods in Malaysia. And second, which we have trusted a local team heavily, and in terms of promoting the feature, in terms of uh, getting that local knowledge around what's going to work, what's not going to work. If you see in these two photos, first one is it's me, and it's like six to seven of us from different departments. We went to Malaysia for user research. We had an hypothesis in place. We went to Malaysia to test that hypothesis qualitatively, and then we also work with the data team to get more metrics around what we are going to build. So it's at Carousel, we make sure that we have a hypothesis in place before we go and build something. We first test it qualitatively and quantitatively. Cool. So I'll just now go more deep into specific examples. Like in this graph, if you see it, it talks about different payment methods in Singapore, like different e-commerce payment methods. Credit card is the most used payment method in Singapore, like 56%. Now let's just go to Malaysia. Like in Malaysia, bank transfer is the most used payment method, and then let's just go to Taiwan. In Taiwan, if you see this credit card, and then you have like pick up at a convenience store. So it's basically you order something and you choose 7-Eleven pickup. And then once the item is delivered, you go to your nearest 7-Eleven and pick the item. That's what the solution is. That's what 7-Eleven pickup is. So all three markets have different top payment methods. Now, how we localized our same product in different markets. So effectively the backend which we have, which is orders and payments infrastructure, that's the same. Whereas on the client side, we have localized the solution. If you go to Singapore, like in Singapore, we have local payment methods. You have DBS Payla, and you have credit cards and debit card. Now you go to Malaysia. In Malaysia, you have credit card, debit cards, but there is also online banking because it's one of the payment methods which has been, which is quite common in Malaysia, and more than 70% of the users use it. Now let's go to Taiwan. In Taiwan, if you want to place an order, you have an option to choose 7-Eleven, which is when we saw that statistic that it's one of the most prominent payment methods in Taiwan. People prefer to pick up from a convenience store. So that's one example, around how we have localized our payment experience in the three markets. Let's jump to the other example. So the key takeaways from this example is that it's important to focus on internationalization, which is having the same backend infrastructure. And second is it's important to understand the local user habits. If they prefer, say, one payment method, you need to make sure that the most preferred payment method is on your platform so that you can target the bigger audience. Now let's look at this. So this is the map of Malaysia. Like for me also, when I moved to Singapore and when I saw that, like my understanding was that that map of Malaysia is this. But when I was working on this market, I got to know that there is West Malaysia and then you have East Malaysia. So both the sides, like this is West and this is East Malaysia, and you have around I think 5 million people who live in East Malaysia and 22 million people who live in this peninsular Malaysia, which is the West Malaysia. So this was something interesting, and we are working on this payments and shipping. So when we are working on launching this payments and shipping solution in Malaysia, and that's when we got to know that that hey, you have this West and East Malaysia, and you have to we need to keep in mind this geographical nuances. So a lot of people buy and sell within West Malaysia, and then you have people buying from buying from like you have between. Okay, there are three transactions possible. One is within West Malaysia, then between West and East Malaysia, and then within East Malaysia. So these are like the three transactions possible. We need to keep in mind that when we are building our shipping and payment solution, that we cater to all the three user segments. Now let's go to Taiwan. In Taiwan, you have 7-Eleven stores. Every 500 meters, you'll see a 7-Eleven store. In every 500 meters, you can see a 7-Eleven store. Like this is an article from Economist. You can see that it's important. You can see that it covers how 7-Eleven has ruled the streets of Taiwan. So how we customized our listing form. So as a seller, when I'm listing an item on Carousell, I have an option to provide, do I want to offer online payments or not? So in Malaysia, as I said that, not all the sellers want to ship to West Malaysia. There are sellers who are only shipping an item within West Malaysia. There are few sellers who are shipping it to East Malaysia. There are few sellers who are shipping it to both West and East Malaysia. So we customize the sell form by adding these two options of West and East Malaysia. If you see as a seller, if you want, you can choose both and ship to ship to both the islands, or you can just choose one and depending on where do you ship. Whereas the same thing when you are in Singapore, it's a small country, a small country, and we have added options which are specific to SingPost, which is the local courier partner, which people relate with, like basic package and track package. These are very specific to SingPost. Whereas in Taiwan, it's a country where people prefer to use a 7-Eleven cash on delivery model, and here we have given an option of 7-Eleven. So the backend infrastructure is same, whereas when as a seller I'm listing an item, if I choose different countries, I see a different sell form. So what we have done specifically in Malaysia, it's basically not everybody wants to ship an item across the continent. Like a lot of sellers, they're okay shipping an item to West Malaysia, or they're okay shipping an item to East Malaysia. So the next step, and there are sellers who just want to ship to one part of Malaysia. So we gave them both the options that you can choose where do you want to ship. So what are the key takeaways from this? Which you can consider. One is it's important to understand the local user habits. Second is you have to understand the market dynamics and the playing field. Like in Malaysia, as I talked about, that not everybody wants to ship to both East and West Malaysia, whereas in Singapore, which is a small country, you have to have just one cell form. It's not going to be a cell form which will cater to an interstate or an intercity shipping market. Now, let's jump into one more example, which is a lot more specific to how we show listings to our user. So if you see, the first example is of Malaysia, second is Taiwan, and third is Singapore. So we use local, yeah, we use, if you see that there is currency, which is, you can see it in ringgit. Here you can see it in Singapore dollars. You can see it in Taiwanese dollars. And that's one. Second, if you see in Taiwan, we offer a 7-Eleven shipping solution where you can ship an item via 7-Eleven. So we have this special tag which covers the shipping. So Whereas the whole listing card or the listing details page, which you see, the backend infrastructure is same. Whereas on the user side, we have customized it, which caters to the user psyche living in that country. Now, one more example, which is how we educate our users. So this Carousell protection, which is an escrow payment solution, we have live in Malaysia and Singapore. But how it's different in like how we educate our users differently in both the markets. So Malaysia is a country where in generally Malaysia and Indonesia, you see that there's high fraud in Southeast Asia. Like in these two countries, the percentage of fraud is really high, the scam and the fraud. Whereas in Singapore, what sellers want when they are listing an item, they want exclusivity. Like we want some exclusivity, and uh, they they want buyers to trust their listing more, and they want to sell faster. And whereas in Malaysia, it's mostly like the country which has the highest fraud in the market, and everybody is looking for protection, and they they want to sell faster as well. So it's the same product in both the markets, but in Malaysia we educate by two key points, which is sell faster and you get committed buyers. Whereas in Singapore, we educate by saying that you stand out with the label, you get exclusivity, and second is your buyer's gonna trust you. So it's the same product, whereas the way we have marketed in both the countries is different. Let's jump into one more example, how we have localized. So it's the same ad and the same campaign which we ran in both Malaysia and Singapore for carousel protection. The same, and this was after the circuit breaker or what, and I think it's called as MCO in Malaysia. It got ended. So we ran this campaign that you can visit your family members, and you can visit your friends and relatives. So how we have localized it, like if you see, it says I come bearing gifts, which is the heading, and whereas we have used a very local language here, and which is the local Malay language, in order to be in touch with our users, in order to connect more with our users with the campaign. I have one more example, which is a video when we went live in Malaysia with carousel protection, like how we localized our product and educated our users. So I'll just quickly play this one, just a second. It's taking a bit of a time.
This is Daniel.
Yeah. Just
This is Daniel. No, he's not waiting for his girlfriend. He's waiting for his Carousell buyer. But when the buyer doesn't show up, Daniel tension lor. This is Farah. Farah loves a good deal. But when the deal is too good, Farah tension lah. Buying and selling shouldn't be so difficult. Say goodbye to troublesome meetups and risky mailings. Only post up the item after the buyer has made the payment. Your transactions are safe with Carousell protection. Get your item as listed or your money back. Jangan tension, guna Carousell protection.
just a second. So if you see in this video, we prepared this video when we launched carousel protection in Malaysia, and this particular video, just a second, yeah, this particular video, if you look at the characters in the video, they all are they all we have catered to the local audience, and we use the local language, and the characters we showed were in line with the local audience so that people can connect. So it's more towards the marketing side. But the point which I'm trying to convey here is that it's extremely important that when you, it not just a product has to be localized, but when you go and do the marketing of your product, or when you are building the GTM strategy, you need to keep in mind localization. Just a second. Yeah. Now, I think we are almost towards the end of the session, so I'll just talk about the key takeaways when you're approaching international markets. So it's extremely important that you understand the local user habits, sentiment, and psychology when you are building your product. You can't just build one product and go live in all the markets. Yes, it's your backend, your overall infrastructure could be same, but on the user side, you have to localize. In fact, Southeast Asia, in Southeast Asia, though it's not as big as say India, or it's not, but each country is very different. What works in Malaysia is very different from what works in Philippines, or what works in Singapore is very different from what works in Taiwan. So it's really important that when you're working on an international product, you're launching in new markets, you understand the local psychology and the market dynamics. And the fourth point which I'm trying to make here is that, like for example, like I was based in Singapore, and when we were launching this payments and shipping solution in Malaysia, I had to trust a lot on my local team. And I think you have to really that power, give that uh, give that power and give that ownership to your local team to take those decisions. Like if you see that video which we just played, specific to carousel prediction, it was built by the local team, because local team understands that what works with the users in that country. So really go and trust your local team. Ask your local team the right questions, but also trust them. And the next is, when you localize, you have to really balance your speed and localization. So there's this thing which comes up that, hey, if I'm launching in new markets, if I localize, then I have to spend more time in building the product. Whereas if I launch the same product in all the markets, it's much faster. So you have to balance both. It depends upon how much important that market is for you. If you think that market is extremely important, then it's okay to spend more time and build the product which is gonna, a product which caters to the user needs. And that's extremely important. At the same time, speed is important, but that's a trade-off which sometimes you have to make. There's one more point which we covered, was specific to localization and scalability. I think it's extremely important that you should know that how much important that market is, and you prioritize your features that scale versus those that are specific to a market. Like when you talk about scale, which means that you want to quickly scale, and which means that you want speed. But when you localize, your speed takes a hit. So comes back to the same point, like prioritize those features with scale. And second, look at get answer to this question from your business stakeholders, from a company perspective, like how much important that market is. Then you need to take a call, should we localize uh, to the very last extent, or should we localize to a minimal extent? And then the next point is, understand the culture and the legal know-how. Like each country has its own rules and regulations. Especially when you're launching payments, you have to understand the local nuances and what are the regulations in that country, and how you can build your product. What works in one country may not work in another country, simply because the government has a different rule, and the government has a different rule in place. Our people have a different habit. So I think this is the key takeaway which I want you guys to get from this presentation and this whole session, that when you're approaching international markets, these are like the key tenets to keep in mind. Cool. I think I'll just now open the round for questions if people have any questions. And I think these are the three questions which you guys have already sent when you did a sign up. Maybe how do we go about now, Lulia?
Thank you so much, Lakshay, for the very interesting presentation. Everybody, if you have questions, please ask them in the chat. And let's start with the ones we have from the submission forms.
Okay, cool. I think I'll start first with the ones which are in the submission form. The key questions which are in the submission form. So one is, how much customization is sustainable in a global platform? I think there's no specific answer to this, that how much is sustainable, how much is not. It totally depends how much important a particular market is for you. I'm assuming that by customization you mean localization. So you have to build your platform in such a way that that when you expand into new markets, your backend infrastructure is same, whereas on the user side, client side, you can do most of the changes. And so there's no specific answer to this. It depends upon the company strategy, it depends upon your platform architecture, and depends upon how easy you can scale it up. Uh, Second, how to educate consumer behavior with the remote development team. I think yeah, that's a great question around how we can educate our engineers who are not in the same country where a user is. So when we build this payments and shipping product, so we focused on the market Malaysia. I'm based in Singapore and my engineers are based in Taiwan. And I had a similar, pain point around how, we can educate our users, educate our engineers and keep them in loop with the user problem. So I'll talk about like 3 points here. One is whenever you're conducting any user research in the user research, or you're speaking to users remotely or even in the same country, even by traveling to the country, just make sure that your engineers also travel with you. It's not just you, your designer, user researcher. Your engineers should also accompany you. So that is one thing which you need to keep in mind. Like keep engineers part of your user research or any of your user facing sessions. Second, this is something which we did. We asked a business team to conduct a session for all the engineers and the tech team that what are we really doing and what's the local market like and who are the users, because your business team is based in that country. So have a session between the local team and the engineers. The local team talks about the pain points and the issues users are facing. Where that's second. And the third, which is your job as a product manager, you have to really make sure that you involve your engineers, your team early in the process. Any qualitative, quantitative research you have, just go and it's something you should share with your engineers. Make sure that they're on board with it, like why we are building something, what's the process, what's the reason like, and share with them all the research which you have. So I think these 3 points I think you can do if you want to when you're working with a remote development team. The next is how to become a product manager focused on localization. I think if you want to become it's not like you can just become a product manager focused on localization. Localization can come in launching any feature, any product. Like it could come for, in my case, it was payments and shipping, whereas some other PM in my company, for him, it could be, the buyer experience, or it could be it could be in some other domain as well. So generally, this localization comes when you work in a global company, or the company has base in more than one country, or the app is in more than one country. Then you want to, when you're launching something, you need to keep in mind the system approach, that how it's going to impact different users, or how it's going to impact different users, or different what do you call the different countries you operate in, like each user in different country, what's the impact is going to be. So I think the way to go about is that maybe a product manager in a global company, when you're working in a global company, the problems you're solving will be at a global level, and where you need to keep in mind the localization piece. And specific to the second question, I think there's this slide which I made with how you can communicate well with your dev team members. So what, like, not just educating them about the user problems, also just make sure that when you're working remotely with your members, you over communicate with them, and uh, like use your Slack, use your Jira, use and anything make sure that you write everything down, you communicate all the decisions and share the minutes of meeting on Slack and email both. So that's these are like the few key points in addition to working with the remote development team.
Cool. We have one question from Daryl. Daryl, would you like to ask it live?
Just a second, I think I'll. Sorry, I was just trying to. Yeah, what's the question? Has the pandemic affected localization? Uh, has the pandemic affected localization consumer behavior in any way for Carousell? If so, how and thanks. Yeah. So pandemic as such has not affected localization for Carousell. But yes, in consumer behavior, definitely what we have seen is that a lot of people started using payments and shipping, uh, because now when circuit breaker happened in Singapore and MCO happened in Malaysia, people started using online payments and shipping, because when you instead of doing a meetup, they prefer to pay online and get the item shipped. So that's one behavior change which we have seen. And I think the overall digital adoption of payments has gone up after the pandemic, in the countries which we operate in. So yeah, specific to localization, I won't say a challenge, but definitely now conducting user research is difficult in comparison to a pre-pandemic level. Earlier, if I want to speak to say 20 users in Malaysia or conduct a user research, I can go and travel to that country and talk to users in person. Now we have to follow a process of onboarding users remotely and then using Zoom or a Google Hangout and get there, have a session with them on Hangouts or on a video call. So that's the second point. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing. Yeah.
Yeah. Just a second.
There's a Zinnia who wants to ask, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, question. Zinnia, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. Can you let me know if you can hear me?
We can
Yeah.
hear you and we can see you. You have a very
Thank
nice
you.
background.
Thank you. And thank you, Lakshay, for the session. And thank you, PMF team, for organizing it today. So just to set the context, so I'm currently pursuing my MBA at NUS. And I am an engineer by background, but I have not had the experience in the product management field. So Lakshay, I actually wanted to ask you for candidates who've not been into the hardcore space of coding, because I come from an electrical engineering background and was the account manager at Microsoft, and I've always been working on the business side of things. So how do you think can we make a transition to this side of the industry? Is it possible? And if yes, any steps that you would suggest we should follow to explore this industry?
Yeah. So, okay, I come from a commerce background. Like I was into investment banking, and I made a transition from investment banking to corporate strategy and then to product management. So, what I'll say that yes, it's possible. That's one, in simple words. Second, how this transition you can make. I think there are three ways you can make this transition in general. Uh, One is if you get a chance to join a tech company, so join a tech company in a non-technical role and then internally make a switch to product management. The second is you can start your own company in tech space. And once you start your own company in tech space and you are the owner and you have built the product, you automatically, get that product thinking up and running. That's second. And third is, since you're doing masters right now and you are you are in your college day you're in your college, so you can read about product management, you can talk to product managers, understand what they do, why they do, and what's the work like. This is something which really interests you, and how you can connect your prior experience with this. And now post MBA, when you're applying to different companies, you're starting on a fresh slate, so you can now apply to a product role. So I think these are the three ways generally people make a move. I think in your case, the third which applies. So I think my 2 cents will be talk to as many product managers as you can, understand the product management domain, and second, see if you can get an internship or uh, say a side project in a tech company in a product role. So that will help you in building a profile.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Zinnia.
And guys, we are hiring for product managers right now, and we're hiring there's one role which is open in India, which is product manager for ads team, and there's one more role which is open in Singapore and India both. It's a senior PM role for trust and community team, and then we're having a product director in Singapore as well. So if you, I understand that you guys can't click on this link, so I've just have this QR code. You can scan the QR code and visit the careers page.
Cool. Thank you so much, Lakshay. Thank you for the interesting presentation, for being with us today. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We will be sharing the recording, and I wish you all a nice rest of the day and see you soon.
Thanks a lot, guys, for joining, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you have any questions related to product management or carousel, anything you have, happy to answer again.